The Marsh Boys podcast is brought to you by
Papa Earl's, Cajun seasoning at its best. Use it on chicken, beef, fish, vegetables, Bloody Marys, and everything in between. Check out their fish fry for that perfect golden crispiness and that great Cajun flavor.
And Top Down Decoys, the most affordable silhouette decoy on the market. Their horizontal and vertical styles are both a perfect fit for adding numbers to your snow, speck, and Canada spread.
You can check out all of our great sponsors through the link in any of our social media bios. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Hey, take it!
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Marsh Boys podcast. I'm Brian.
I'm Ryan.
And we are joined today by Matthew Williams of On the Trail Deer Recovery. How you doing, Matt?
Pretty good yourself, guys?
Not so bad.
All right.
It's Monday, but we're sitting here recording, so.
Yeah, the grind goes on.
So, obviously, you track deer for a living?
Not for a living, more of a hobby and a passion.
I got you. I got you.
So,
how long you been doing it?
we've been involved in it just about 4 years now. I've been certified for 3 years. I tried to get my dog Arrow certified when she was just about 6 months old, but there was no testing process to get her certified, so I had to wait till the following year. So, was able to just work on private land that friends had that deer were down because, you're not allowed to track if you're not certified on state ground and things like that. So,
how hard is the process getting certified?
It's not necessarily a hard process. It's just based on getting your dog ready for the test. You have to qualify through a United Blood Trackers Association test. On typical, it's a 400-yard trail that's laid by a judge, and it ages anywhere between 6 and 8 hours. And then they bring you in. Your dog is allowed to have, I believe, 2 callbacks. So if you leave the line, they'll call you back one time. You restart. You leave the line again. They call you back. If you leave it again, you're disqualified from that testing process, and you got to start over again. But there's another one that's out there now. I believe it's called the Blood Trackers Association, American Blood Trackers Association. I don't really know too much of their rules, but I know that New Jersey now is utilizing that testing service also.
Okay.
So
once you go through the UBT, is there anything you have to go through NJ Fish and Game?
You do have to submit paperwork to the state, and then they give you a permit, and then that permit, just allows you to track with that specific dog, or if you have multiple dogs, you just have to have them all certified, and then you have, as long as you fall underneath of that permit, you're good to go.
Oh, okay. So once you go through the UBT, you just file some paperwork and...
Yep.
You have to recert every year, I'm assuming?
Yeah, you have to recert every year, but you don't have to retest as far as the entry-level test. Once you have that, you're certified. Okay. Now you can do, they have phase 1, phase 2, and so on, which is just harder and longer tracks.
What's Arrow?
Arrow's a UBT 1 certified.
Okay.
I've thought about getting her the number 2 certification. It's just not something that's like really going to make or break me.
Not a pressing need.
No, it doesn't give her any other feature of why somebody was going to really call me.
So is it basically more or less the same thing as guys? So your junior hunt test for a lab is your entry level, where it's different, where you have to get a certification to do what you need to do, but the UBT 2 and you said 3. Yeah. That's more or less your master hunter.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you're just it's another level of graduation basically.
Okay.
So.
I'm assuming the breeders of these bloodhounds probably go for 3 because that would make their dogs more
Definitely.
Desirable.
Yeah.
But in the actual practicality of it, you don't need 2 or 3.
No, you don't have to. I mean, I would assume that if you wanted to go on a scale of if I wanted to breed Arrow with another type of bloodhound or something like that, the other owner may say, okay, well, what kind of qualifications does she have? Where did the bloodline come from? And her parents were both certified trackers and stuff, okay. and Arrow came from Brownsville, Indiana. So,
okay.
And which was
seems like a lot of hounds come out of that.
Yeah,
Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois.
Definitely. Yeah.
How'd you decide on Arrow? What was the whole process leading up to getting into all this?
So it really boiled down to I guess I had called a dog for a buddy of mine, and the dog came in and recovered his deer, and I was kind of intrigued by it, that the dog was able to work through that. And I've always had labs my whole life, and then my dog Ace had passed away in 2019, and I really didn't want a dog. It was kind of beat you up, and
yep.
My wife was like, hey, I think we should get a dog because we just had a daughter and they'll grow up together. And I was like, she's like, well, if you don't pick a dog soon, I'm just going to get something. And she said something about getting a bloodhound, and I was like, that could work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like little dogs. I want a dog that has a purpose.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
So that's kind of how we got involved with getting a bloodhound. And I spent a lot of time on the phone with a gentleman by the name of John. He's Tracker John. He's a big tracker that comes out of New York. He spends a lot of time in the Midwest tracking for big outfitters and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I just called this guy out of the blue and I said, hey, what kind of dog do I got to get for tracking? And I thought for sure he wouldn't even talk to me, but he probably spent close to 2 hours on the phone with me. Mm-hmm. And he told me everything and everything not to buy a bloodhound. He said, get yourself a Dachshund hound, a lab, a German Shepherd, something. And I'm just like, well, I got a question. I said, you run bloodhounds? He says, I do this for a living. He says, I'm not doing this for, fun. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. So by the end of the conversation, he says, you're going to buy a bloodhound, aren't you? He said, probably. It was kind of already set by that point. So
it's funny how people in the hunting community are like that. You think they won't talk to you, and they'll sit there and tell you everything about what it is they do.
Yes.
And a lot of it comes from the passion, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a broad spectrum of just sportsmen in general. There's always the guy that doesn't want to talk too much about a buck he has on camera, right? Yeah. But as soon as that buck's dead, he's wanting to tell you all the pictures and show
exactly
you.
How he killed it. Yeah.
But up until that point, I think that if you're a good quality sportsman and you're willing to share a passion with somebody, you're going to be willing to give them information and tell them,
Mm-hmm.
so.
So, how often do you get calls? Are you called every day, a couple times a week?
So it all depends. This past week's been a little busy. Just yesterday I ran 2 tracks that both came in. Unfortunately, they both came up with zeros on both of them. It is a possibility, and I always tell the guy, you got a 50-50 shot. It's 50-50 shot that the deer's alive or it's dead, depending on how much information you can give me that led up to the shot and after the shot. But it's just kind of however the call comes in, they go. I have had multiple calls in one day, and some days, like today, the phone didn't ring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
And that comes down to, he said one of the topics you wanted to talk about was the quartering of the deer. So that shot placement is kind of is that how you gauge the success of how it's going to be if they can tell you where they shot it?
Well, see, I have a philosophy is I don't know unless I go, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't screen calls. If calls come in, I take them. And, my number one priority is basically to put as many deer on the tailgate as I possibly can.
Absolutely.
And I can't tell you if that deer is going to be dead or it's going to be alive. I have to let Arrow do her job to recover your deer. If we come to a property line and we have to stop, well, so be it. That is the thing. If we're running the line and she's not staying glued to the line, she's kind of deviating from the line and the conditions are in her favor, then we're dealing with a live deer, something that's just meandering through the woods. Now, as far as shot placement goes, it all depends on how and where the deer is shot. Quartering 2 shots, they can definitely be fatal for sure, depending on where it is. But a lot of guys, they want to try to tuck it up right behind the front shoulder and get there. But in order to get through there, they feel like they have to be close to the shoulder. And what happens? They hit the shoulder.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If a deer carries off your arrow, let's just say, and you're not shooting a low poundage bow or something like that, there's a reason you hit something hard that stopped that arrow. It stopped it in its tracks. So, and that all depends on what you hit. So, if you get a quartering 2 shot on the left side and you go through and it exits back further into the diaphragm, you could be dealing with a, 1 lung, liver hit, and maybe a gut hit. Mm-hmm. But if you hit the other side on his right side and you go through the front shoulder, you could just basically hit the 1 lung and go right out past the other side of the diaphragm and never touch the liver, because the liver is actually tucked on the right side of the deer and it's actually separated by a membrane that holds the liver to the one side, and then the stomach chambers come up on the other side.
Okay.
So everything's in there. So you can actually, if you took a deer and laid it on its back and made a cross across it, you could see what you could hit and what you couldn't hit.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, it really depends on what you get. Now, with crossbows, I find that you don't get a lot of forensics off the arrow immediately. There's guys that call me and you're like, well, I think I hit him. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, I got a little tinge of blood on my arrow. I'm like, okay, so you caught him somewhere. And we'll get on that track and 100 yards, there's a dead deer.
Now, do you think that's because the the FPS on these crossbows are so much more than a compound. It's just cruising through there. It's not catching a lot of blood, immediate blood anyway.
It very well could be, and I can't answer that fact to be a scientific factor behind it, but something is definitely causing it, because I believe you can send a 280 feet per second rage through a deer with a compound bow, and you're gonna, as long as you went through a blood-soaked organ, that arrow is gonna be coated from head to tail.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You could do the same thing with a crossbow bolt. Sometimes they have blood on them, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've done a couple of them that have been liver shots and very minimal blood. And then I had a guy that had a heart shot. It was, you could have thought the thing was missed. I was like, I don't even know. And then next thing I was boom, done. So
that's so. Where do you think some of these guys get the mindset where they have to shoot them in that pocket, that armpit pocket? Because I've always, and explaining to some newer hunters that we get to talk to and get to help out, I tell them, you don't have to tuck it in there. A double long shot will do wonders on a deer at 20, 30 yards. I'll show you some of the shot placements on him and a couple other bucks. I'm very much say this is the deer, this is his leg. I'm very much a here kind of guy.
okay,
I wouldn't say center mass,
right,
but I'm shooting kind of even with the top of the shoulder blade.
Okay,
back in the main part of the lungs.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you're hunting from a tree stand, and you have a downward angle, you always try to want to, imagine where that arrow is going to go if it goes through the deer, right? So you got to have a downward trajectory. That's great. But, if you're in a blind, I think that what happens is a lot of guys try to get like kind of right up the back of the leg. And let's face it, a lot of times when these big bucks are coming into bait piles, they're coming in low light situations.
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe that front leg was forward a little bit, and now you go and punch it through, and what you thought was really, if the leg was vertical, now it's forward. Now you're a little more forward, and you're just punching into the other shoulder. Now, granted, you're most likely still going to catch something there, but if the leg is further forward and you aim up there, you could go right across the front of the side of the brisket, if it's a low shot. So,
or if it's a low, you're catching all the fat underneath the...
Correct, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure most guys have, skinned out their deer. When they get to that brisket area, it is loaded with fat.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of veins and a lot of arteries that kind of go through the brisket area. So, guys will misconcept a brisket hit sometimes with maybe a liver hit because you get a lot of darker vein and blood in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I had that issue on my very first deer. I shot about 3 inches forward and 1 inch low. I missed my first deer ever came in front of me. Got really jumpy.
Oh, yeah.
And she ran about 40 yards, and I mean, it looked like you took a 5-gallon bucket of blood and just dumped it. Mm-hmm. And then we found one speck of blood about 100 yards further, and the farmer called me about a week later and asked if I'd shot at one, and looks like she's doing fine.
Yeah. I mean, some of these pictures that I get back from hunters, and even friends of mine who are in the tracking community that we talk, and you're just like, man, that's a dead deer, like, in your brain. But these animals are so tough. And what happens at September with a whitetail versus what happens today is a whole different ballgame. Because, now we're going into the rut. The testosterone levels are building in these bucks, and I'm just coming here. I've seen a buck chasing 3 or 4 does in the field right down the street here.
Sure.
So, these bucks, sometimes they get shot, and they got one thing on their mind, and that's the breed. And, they can be shot, and it could be a high back shot, it could be a shoulder hit, maybe a low hit, that potentially could be fatal, but they don't know they're fatally wounded, and they'll just keep trailing them does, and the next thing you know, they fall over, boom, dead.
He probably ran 600 yards.
Yeah.
And I hit him like I said, clean double long shot, and he ran and ran and ran and ran. It was nuts. And then he bedded down in a soybean field, and I got about 100 yards from him, and I saw him head up, kind of looking around.
Yeah.
And I mean, it took another hour. I don't think he died. I think it took 2.5 hours for him to go on a clean double long shot.
Yeah, it's amazing. What I mean? If you think about it, like, how can something sustain life?
Yeah.
That we would still be. I would have never moved.
Yeah.
That's reminded me. Are you aware of the Nature is Metal page? I think they have it on like Instagram and Snapchat, and they might even have it on Facebook.
I don't believe I am now.
So a lot of it's like, like actual animals in the wild. A lot of it's kind of gruesome, but they did have a post of this one deer. It was like after some kind of fight with another deer, and there was a horn from an antler from another deer straight through his head, and he was just walking around like it was fine. It healed over. It's the most crazy thing ever.
I think it was
They
an
can go
elk.
through- I
Whitetail?
I think it was a whitetail. It was tiny.
I actually have one on my wall that when I shot at the taxidermist, I used a gentleman by the name Bill Weber out of Galloway, and he actually pulled a tine out of the deer's eye.
Really?
It was a deer I shot in Maryland, and it was, it wasn't real long, but it was like 2-3 inches, but you would think 2-3 inches penetrating into your skull is going to be pretty deadly.
Yeah.
So
One thing I learned from that page is a lot of like the plant-eating animals, like over in Africa, like the zebras and the deer over here and stuff like that. They can go through a lot and just keep going like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's definitely a testament to the toughness of whitetails.
I'm gonna try to find
For
that.
sure.
And I think bow hunters figure that out every day.
Yes.
Now, granted, other than him, I've gotten very lucky and deer haven't gone maybe
Here it
50
is.
yards, but this
Like
is
nothing ever happened.
So
mule deer.
yeah, so that can be two of things. That can either be a tine from another deer, or what happens is during the process of deer actually growing antlers, when the velvet can actually detach from something early on in the stage and hit somewhere else on their skull, and it'll grow right out of that area.
Really?
So I actually have 2 bucks on my wall. I have one that has a horn that's coming straight out of the center of his skull.
Is that where you see the unicorn bucks and the
Yep,
three-
and you get the one that comes out the side. So it all depends in the early stages of the their horn growth. If something like if they get injured or something, it can grow completely different. So definitely could be either one. With that. So
I've definitely heard that if they get hit by a car or maybe attacked by a coyote or something when they're younger in the velvet stage, it can completely screw up their antler development.
yes, it very well can, and that's I believe how maybe sometimes we get these freaks of nature.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
What would you say? So speaking of freaks of nature, what would you say is one of the bigger, more impressive deer you've tracked? Because you are strictly basically southern New Jersey, right?
Yeah, southern Jersey. I really don't venture above the 195 line too much in the state. I've went into Pennsylvania here and there, not too much, but I mean, really just good 8-pointer, nice 10-pointer, nothing like really extravagant, and where I'm at basically, which is like the Wharton State area, forest, things like that. We have some good deer, but they're just few and far between. You're not dealing with like some of the farmland bucks and stuff like that. So
We're probably very deep in that forest too.
yeah, and the deer that we do recover that are good ones, they're really good ones for the area. And I went after a couple really good ones this year, and I got one. Just the gentleman sent me a picture back yesterday that was back on camera. And the hole in the side of his body. I mean, like, man, I couldn't ask for a better placement. Like, what happened? They're just tough, man.
So it seems like this job has brought you a lot of knowledge about the anatomy of deer. Do you have like a background in that, like butchering or anything like that?
As far as I would say more or less just over the years of skinning out deer, our local gun club and stuff like that, you kind of see like, how the shoulder lines are, things like that. But as far as like an actual understanding of pure anatomy, no.
Yeah.
It's just what I've learned over the years, Now, every time that we do recover a deer that is a marginal hit, let's say, right? I try to have the hunter dress that deer very carefully so I can get all the organs out of the deer so I can find out what actually caused the deer to die.
Okay.
There's a track that we ran the other day. A gentleman had shot the deer a little far back, I would say maybe 2 inches behind the last rib. And the deer went maybe 300 and some yards and was dead. But when we opened him up, his liver and his guts were fully intact. Everything was perfectly fine. And, come to find out that most likely what had happened is the arrow had ruptured one of the kidneys. And the kidney's a blood-soaked organ, and they can expire very quickly in that point in time. But everything else was perfectly fine. When you first opened it up, I'm like, what actually killed this deer?
Yeah.
Because depending on where you hit the liver, if you just slice the liver, it could be 2 weeks.
Really?
It could be 20, 30 hours before that deer, dies, depending on how much of a slice it is. Intestinal shots can go extremely long.
Yeah.
It's just basically when is it going to fester up and die? And most of the time it's going to happen when the deer start to calm back down and their testosterone levels go to normal and they can't sustain life anymore.
They just bed down.
They just bed down and it's over. Yeah. Right now I don't think the bucks are bedding down enough that they know that they're wounded.
Yeah. It has gotten hot the last week or two.
Oh yeah, it's turning on. I mean, just the last couple ones. Oh, he was running the doe, and that's how it's been the last couple calls,
Yeah.
So it happens.
What's the longest track you've ever had to go on?
So the longest confirmed recovery I have is just over 2,000 yards, and it was just about 30 hours old. I had went earlier in the day before, and I started tracking a deer, and the deer was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to the hunter. I told him I'd come back the following day. We met back up. It was a cold morning, and Arrow was having a little bit of trouble locking onto this deer, and it was kind of like, man, she did really good the night before. What was going on? Well, the problem was it was like 18 degrees out. So, everything was frozen.
Yeah.
And I started a little early. So once the ground started to warm up and the thermal started to rise, then she was able to get back on it, So that would probably be one of our longest. I have one that I feel that was maybe a little longer. It was in a shorter time frame. It was only like maybe 16 hours old. Mm-hmm. But my phone quit working and GPS didn't lock on. And so I can't really confirm that one. But I think it was somewhere just over that. So the longest track that I've ever got involved in was just about 41 hours old or something like that.
Wow.
It was one of those scenarios where the hunter shot it. They thought they made a bad hit, so they backed out. They went back in the morning. They jumped the buck up, and then they spent the rest of the day looking for him. And then when I got the call, it was that night, so we'd go the next day kind of deal. And Arrow just, she worked. The problem is when you do grid searching with your friends, like everybody's like, all right, we're going to go out and get this buck. You guys go out, and everybody starts looking for the deer, and one guy's ahead, and everybody else is kind of standing behind. The problem is a bloodhound and labs and all the other tracking dogs out there that are trained to track the way we do is we're not working off of blood. I don't care. There doesn't really have to be any blood. If the deer is sick and dying and it's going to be a fatal shot, there doesn't have to be a drop of blood. So what happens is a deer has an indigital gland that's located in all four of its hooves, and it's on the upper side of its leg. And if you peel back the hair, you can actually see a little journal in there. And what happens is that releases a clear secretion that comes out of there. Now, they also release different compounds out of that same scent gland, but the one that we're looking for is, hey, I'm getting sicker and sicker and sicker before I die. That's the same way wolves, coyotes, foxes, everything tracks. Any canine tracks the same exact way.
Okay.
Really?
So that's what we're looking for. And when the deer produces that hormone and keeps shedding that hormone deeper into the track, it's getting more and more viable.
Okay.
You know what I mean? For the dog. The dog should actually be able to pick up speed the closer they get to the actual wounded deer. Now that also goes backwards too, that when a deer is shot initially, it starts to produce that pheromone immediately because it's like adrenaline, it's in shock, it's running away. And then all of a sudden it might get, let's say you call me and you say, hey, I think I might have made a mediocre shot, maybe a shoulder hit. You're not too sure. Okay, so we come in the next morning and we trail that deer to a bed, and there's no deer in the bed, right? So we already know that he was able to get out of that bed because you guys didn't bump him the night before, but that maybe the coyotes or something bumped him, let's just say, right? So the dog's ability to work up to that bed is going to be very good. Past that bed, if it's a healthy deer, now the deer has had time to calm down and all the senses have come back to normal, and now the deer is going to stop producing that hormone. And once that hormone and pheromone kind of goes away, now the deer is becoming from a sick deer to a healthy deer, and eventually all scent will disappear. Now, I do believe that each deer has a unique scent. Now, I can't guarantee that that's the difference between strawberry and vanilla. I don't know that, but I
It's
think
like
that
person to person.
person to person. But I don't believe that the dog can really distinctively tell maybe what is the difference. But I feel that they can hold on to the track a little longer, as long as there's just a little bit of that pheromone released.
Okay.
And then that's kind of like when the dog kind of gets to the end of the track, it'll just be like they're trying to vacuum the scent out of the earth, trying to find that deer, and that's usually a telltale sign. That,
So when that dog starts scurrying back and forth, zigzagging.
Yes.
It's healthy. It wasn't a good shot.
Right, it's going to probably live, and that's basically, how I read Arrow's abilities. I can tell when she's 100% locked in and, this is going to be a good one, or you can get maybe, say, 300, 400, 500 yards down the line, and all of a sudden things start to change. And then, okay, did the dog miss a backtrack? Did the dog miss a turn? That's when we'll bring the dog back. We restart, and I'm like one of those guys. I don't give up easy. You know what I mean? Like I keep going back, and I keep a surveyor ribbon in my pocket, and usually I'll hang a ribbon in the woods. If she brings me back to that same line twice, there's no second guessing. We're going to continue on because she brought me to that same spot for a reason. Mm-hmm. You know, I need to figure out what it is. Let her work. You know, it wasn't just 2 weeks ago. I did a track back home. Young kid shot the night before, and they had maybe like 3 or 4 drops of blood right where the deer went into the woods, and that was it. So we came in the next day, and 747 yards later, 100% bloodless trail to a deer bedded on the edge of a swamp that was in his first bed. He never drew not one drop of blood after he went in that woods line that I saw. Now, sometimes it is hard. You know, you might miss like a real tiny speck, but like no blood smears on trees, none of that kind of stuff.
Noticeable blood.
No noticeable blood, you know. So, and there's sometimes, you know, I'll see a blood trail on the ground. I can see it, and arrow will just go the other way, and that's kind of when I know, like, okay, there's nothing holding her to that track.
Yeah.
You know, now she's trying to go into search mode. You know.
Yeah, for a few years I ran. Me and my cousin ran redbone coon dogs.
Okay.
And you can kind of see some similarities between running coon dogs. I mean, if they were on a hot line, it was tail up, nose down, they were going.
Right.
But if they were in an area where, you know, I noticed it a lot where coons crossed, you know, swampy areas and stuff. They were all over the place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or there was a spot where they came off, the coon went up a tree, jumped to another tree, same thing. So yeah, I it's easy to see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
When they're on, they're on. But
and when they're off, they're off.
Yes.
And to get back to, you know, earlier we were talking about, you know, going out the grid search. That pheromone that's released from the deer, that gets all over your feet. So, you know, and you don't know what's on your feet, but she can sense where you guys went. And the best way I can kind of picture this is if, you know, let's say first thing in the morning you wake up and your front yard's snow covered, right? And you walk out to your mailbox and you walk straight back in your same tracks. And then kids go outside and the whole front yard's blown up. That's what the dog sees.
Gotcha.
It's very hard to find that line again, you know, but once you can get the dog past that grid search, and it is a fatal deer, you're going to get back on it. And that's sometimes I'll take arrow out maybe 200 yards past, and I'll let her cut on a 90-degree angle straight across the woods. And I just, you know, I put it in my GPS so I know exactly where I am. And you'll just watch her. Boom, hits the line, off we go. Mm-hmm. You know.
Now, a lot of these tracks that you run, they're later, right? Because I'm assuming the hunter tries to find it on their own first.
And I encourage hunters to go out and, you know, to find your own deer 100%. Mm-hmm. You know, nobody wants to call me. Let's face it. You know what I mean? I'm like the last guy somebody wants to call. So
that's more like hell,
I gotta call this guy. Right. So, you know, when I do show up, it's kind of like, just be straight and honest, you know, like, hey, you know, we looked, you know, we did grid search the area, because I'm going to be able to tell if she's working a line 100% straight and then all of a sudden she's going left, she's going right, she's going up, she's going back. Mm-hmm. I'm going to know that this is where you guys grid searched, you know, and that's okay. But if you tell me that ahead of time, hey, that lets me know that as soon as I start seeing her do that, okay, now I just got to maybe find the line that the deer took or take her out and just strip that area, you know. And it's kind of nice when guys will show you, like if they're using OnX or something like that for their capability of tracking, I can see where they walked. You know, so that kind of helps. But, you know, if it's a sick deer and it's going to die, most of the time we can work through those grid search and get back to the line that we need to be on.
So where I was going with that was a lot of these tracks you're picking up later on. How often do you find the deer, like, because I was going through some of your older pictures, they got eaten by a coyote or something before you got there. How often do you come across that?
So it definitely does happen, and this is where I kind of feel, and this is just a personal opinion, that if you shoot a deer, let's say you make a bad shot. Let's just say we're dealing with a liver and a gut shot, right? Mm-hmm. And you go in 2 hours after the shot and you jump the deer, not knowingly that you jumped the deer. And you go right past and you walk right past a wound bed that you didn't even notice was a bed. Because sometimes their beds don't even look like beds because they've laid it only for a short period of time and it doesn't have any compression area to it. Yeah. So you've jumped that deer 2-3 times and then you're like, oh, the blood ran out. You know, what's going on here? And then you call me in. Okay, so we come in, we work that line. But the problem is just like arrow has the capability of tracking that animal, so does the coyote. So what happens is if you shoot the deer at point A and it goes to point B and it dies in its bed, I find a lot of times that the coyotes don't find it. But if you bump it from point B to C to D and so on, now all the coyote has to do is come across the line just like we do it on a 90-degree turn and bang, they pick it up. Yeah. You know, it only takes a dog a quick second to realize, okay, this is getting older and that's getting fresher. I have to go this way. You know what I mean? So there's, especially with coyotes, especially if they're hunting in a pack, there's no
basically you give them more real estate to find this deer, 100%. The easier they're going to find it.
Yes.
I'm imagining it like a tripwire. Like the longer it is, the more they're going to hit it and go, follow it up.
Right.
So I get you.
Yeah. And that's kind of been my thought process on it. There's no like scientific research behind that, but it's just like the guys that haven't pushed the deer, they backed out like, hey, I think I saw a gut, and they just want to call in a dog because maybe it rained the night before and things like that, and you just put her to work, and most of the time you can, we find a deer dead in its first bed. There are times that they're bumped, and it happens, but the biggest thing is just knowing what you're looking at. Like if you suspect that you're a possible gut shot or a liver shot just by where your last thought process when at arrowing through the deer, just base it all off of that. Everything you're going to do. I always tell guys, if you think that you got a gut shot and you have time on your hands, go to tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
He's most likely going to be about 100, 150 yards, going to be in his bed, and he's going to be dead. Or even a doe. But if you don't realize those signs and you get amped up and you want to go after it, you got a good chance you're going to push them. I mean, I've seen them alive 20-some hours into my tracks, where they're so sick they can't get out of the bed. And then you get the other ones like I had the other day. I mean, Arrow tracked that deer. We showed up, I think it was like 6.5 hours after the shot. The guy thought he might have had a high back hit, but it ended up being basically an intestinal hit that cut just all through the intestines. And she was out in front of me 30 yards, and all of a sudden I heard all this commotion. I'm like, what the hell? And I'm running down the lead, and here she's got the back of this deer. She's got him by the back of the neck, and he's trying to get up. And I'm just like, oh, my goodness. But he was so sick that he didn't leave that area, and got the hunter to get up there and get another shot on him, and we were able to recover it. But, if they're not that sick and they can get up, they will – and they're going to get out of there as quick as they can, And I'm sure you guys already know, but – deer own the darkness.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I don't care who you are. They'll just lay right there and let you walk right by them. And as soon as you walk by, boop, gone. So, and it's the same way with tracking at nighttime. And I really prefer to track during the day because I can see everything and see what's going on. But sometimes you got to go at night.
So, how does the rain affect tracking? Because now, like I was always under the assumption, I'm not very deep into this at all. I've only ever shot one deer. I'm getting into it. I thought you would follow the blood. So with that pheromone, does the rain affect that pheromone, or
not necessarily? No. So like a torrential downpour, yeah, it's probably going to have some dilution to the track, right? But if we're talking just like a nice misty rain, no problem at all. So when I was a kid, I think it was my father always said, if you go into your seat to do anything, you hope it rains because it washes all your scent away. Well, that's not the case.
Really?
It's just like when you're driving your car down the road and a light mist comes, all the oils rise to the surface. It's the exact same thing happens in the woods. That's why early mornings in the light rain and stuff like that, you'll see big bucks up and cruising because everything is like it just happened yesterday. Now it's fresh again. It's right in front of their face. It's the same thing for the dog. Okay. So, we've worked, I ran a couple tracks that have been rained on for 10 hours, and it was just like candy for the dog.
Really?
Didn't affect her at all.
Snow covering the pheromone?
Snow, depending on how deep. If we're talking an inch or so, it's not bad. Okay. Because basically, she's going to be able to work through that. She might have to work on some brush that's a little higher or down low, depending on whatever she can grab.
Yeah.
But, she's not, sometimes, she encompasses everything as we go in. I always let Arrow follow the hunter to the tree stand wherever we're heading because now she has your scent profile. She knows what you smell like. So that's already discarded once she starts going. But if you started saying going down this line, she might follow you up that line, and then she'll realize like, okay, well, I smell him, I don't smell nothing else, and she'll self-correct herself and come back, and then she'll find what she needs to. She just has to differentiate between a healthy deer and a sick deer. And anytime you have like bait piles, obviously like it's an influx of deer all the time. So, there could have been deer there 20 minutes before we got there, and now she has to work through that. And sometimes I will see her get excited, like where she'll want to dart all over the place, and I just bring her back, I calm her down, and she eventually finds what I need her to find. She takes her line. So
now, that was my question. You're starting your track at a bait pile scenario. Are you taking her to the bait pile, or are you going a decent enough radius to where everything's not condensed all at once?
So,
or does she know by now that she knows that pheromone you're talking about, or blood, that's what she needs to pick up?
yes. So in reality, I like to try to start right at the hit site.
Okay.
Unless the hit site was completely contaminated, and then say like you took it, let's just say you start from your bait pile and you worked all the way through this real thicket, and then you came to like a little tiny 4-wheeler trail, and then you guys stopped right there. Sometimes I'll just say, okay, did you mark it? Yep. And we just let Arrow come in at a 45 degrees or a 90-degree angle, and she picks that line. And as long as she doesn't want to go back towards where your hit site was, and then I'll just turn her around and get her to go the other way, and then she'll just pick up that line, and we'll continue on. So it all depends on the scenario, But a lot of times I like to start at the hit site if I possibly can. So
now, how much of this was trained and how much of it was instinct, do you think?
Well, I would probably say as far as tracking a pheromone, I would say that's a training portion. But being able to hold on to a scent is definitely just bred into them. Once they have whatever the scent is that you want them to go with, they're going to go. If you give her, an artifact of maybe like clothing, like my kids, I would assume that if I gave her like a sock and said, we're going to go find the kids, and the kids were to leave with those socks, we can trail them just about anywhere that they go. That would be my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Now can't say that if she comes across a wounded deer, she's not going to pull off on that, but that's going to be the thing. So.
You ever try to do it with any of your friends' dogs just for fun? See if they could handle anything like that?
I have not. No. I don't. I have one buddy that was he was talking about wanting to get his dog certified. It was an older. I think they were Boykins or something like that, Cocker Spaniel or something. So, and he asked about it, and I was like, hey, all you can do is try, see if you put a line in for her, if she can pick it up, and maybe it'll work out, maybe not, But I have ran lines where homeowners and hunters have brought out their lab and have worked that line, and like, hey, the dog couldn't do it. Well, there's a difference between a couch potato and a experienced dog, Like I don't put Arrow on things that don't have to do with tracking deer. Like, I've had people ask me to, go look for their pets. And I hate to say no, but at the same time, like, if your pet is sick and wounded, yeah, I could probably find it. But if it's just a healthy dog, like, yeah, she might trail it, but there's no guarantee that she's not just going to be like, hey, I want to go check out this deer, and off she takes me. And then I did no service to you as a person, so that's kind of where I just draw the line. Like, I'll do anything I can to help somebody find their dog, because we've all been there. I mean, I lost Arrow for 72 hours one time.
Really?
Yeah, it was not pretty, but it's. My wife was upset. My 2 kids, I got 2 little girls, and they were home crying, and it's rough. So
what happened?
So I was heading to go do a track. It was the first part of the season in 2000. I think it was 22, and I just stopped by my local gun club, and they were doing a roof project that day, and I had her out of the truck on just like a regular house lease, and somebody hit the nail gun in there, and she just took off, and she bolted out, and then before I could grab a whole lead, she just took off, and she ran into the woods, and I think for the next 48 hours she had the time of her life, just baying deer all over the place. We found her up under somebody's deck after a rainstorm. My wife was like, there's a storm coming. I said, yeah. She's like, she's gonna be scratching at somebody's back door to get in. And they let their little dog out in the morning. They heard this awful growl from underneath the deck, and they ended up looking on Facebook, and that's how we ended up getting her with social media.
What was really funny, so like I told you, we used to run dogs, and we put out a state piece, and the dog picked up on a coon trail and ran out the Garmin GPS.
Okay.
So we're trying to find him, driving the truck around, and I forget what it's called. I want to say the backup collar or something. We're driving around, could not find the dog, or he could not find the dog. And like I said, I wasn't with him on this particular hunt, but an old lady had let him in through the back door. He ended up on an old lady's porch, and she was going to keep him. And I think it was the same thing he had posted on Facebook, lost a dog, had a collar with his name on it and everything, and I don't know if it was Facebook or the daughter came in and called him. She was going to keep him. She was inside, had him on the couch, feeding him, and this was a red bone. It looked like hound dogs, hunting dogs.
Yeah.
She didn't care.
I mean, some people, they have a heart like that, where they're willing to just take in stuff, but at the same time, I feel like people are just like, hey, somebody's probably looking for this dog.
It's somebody's dog.
Yeah, it's somebody's dog, and like now Arrow wears what we call, it's called a phi collar, so it's a GPS coordinated collar right off the satellite. She wears that all the time. And we charge it, it lasts like 2 weeks or whatever, and it sends updates to my phone. So if like she gets to the edge of my property line, it says Arrow left the house. And I'll look out there and she'll still be in the property. But after that it was a learning experience, and now she wears that, and she also wears a Garmin 200i all the time when she's tracking. So God forbid something happens.
Do you hold her on a lead? Or
So all dogs in the state of New Jersey have to be on a lead.
Okay.
Yeah, they're never allowed off the leash.
Oh, on wildlife management areas, yes.
Even on private land.
Oh, really? Private too?
Yes. As if you're tracking deer, yes.
Now, is this because? So I know I want to say it's New York, Massachusetts, some other states, if a hunting dog crosses a property line, it's not illegal to go retrieve your dogs. Now, New Jersey does not have that law. Is that why they need to be led on a lead?
I'm not too really sure on why it is. It's just that's basically the rules of the permit.
Gotcha.
We can never let them off. So and the tracking community really came into play in like 2010. There was I think there was 10 guys on a scientific research project that basically said that, hey, these other states are allowing people to utilize dogs on leads and off lead. We would like to try it on lead to see if it would benefit the hunters of recovering deer. And they did it all the way up till 2018, just the sole group of guys, and then it became to where more people could apply when they actually came out with the permit. And so then it kind of got bigger after that. And I think now there's like, I want to say there might be close to 30 registered dogs in the state for tracking, but some of them aren't as active as others. And, let's face it, everybody's got, different daytime jobs, families, right. So it all boils down to what you can do and what you can't do. So
I feel like that's kind of strange to me that New Jersey hopped on so late, because tracking dogs have been a thing for like all
of time
since we had dogs. Yeah. So why were they so reluctant in the beginning, and do you know anything about how that came about?
So from what I said, I just kind of know that there was a group of guys that wanted to do a study, and I think the gentleman's name I think I just asked the other day actually about it. Let me see if I can figure it out for you. But he basically came out and said, hey, we'd like to try to come up with something. Dr. Walgas.
Okay.
He was the professor in charge in 2010, and they just continued working off of that.
Like wall, like as in a wall, and gas as in like.
Let's see, it's WOLGAST.
And that was in the state of New Jersey. They did this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And there was, like I said, I think it was either 10 or 13 guys that were part of that. And if I remember correctly, it was like a gentleman by the name of Darren Doran, Kyle Gilson, Dan Cheeseman, and a couple other guys that were involved in it. I don't remember all the names, but, they've been basically the forefathers that have led the way and paved the way for us to be able to do this now. And I talk to most of these guys on a daily basis. If I can't get to your track, I'm going to send you somebody that I feel is going to do the exact same amount of work that I would do if I was there, and the caliber of work that I'm going to give you. Now, and that just entails of making sure that when I leave your piece of woods or that area, that your deer is not dead there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if that takes me stripping the woods and just having her in search mode and letting her air scent stuff, that is what it is. I try not to let her do that kind of stuff, but if it makes us get the job done on something that maybe she missed or this or that, at least I get the job done and I go home. And, a lot of guys still send the pictures in. Like I said, like later on, it might be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or months on end before I'll get a picture. And sometimes I never get a picture, but, maybe that deer got harvested during gun season or something else, and you just never know.
Yeah.
So, and
I've heard of that quite a bit. With guys hunting neighboring properties where somebody shot a little high, between the spine and the lung.
Yep.
They had a hole in them, and somebody during shotgun season shot him on a bait pile.
Definitely.
2 months later.
Yeah. And I ran one. I think it was the year before last for a gentleman up in like Barnegat area, and he was shooting a fixed blade head, and he was like, man, I think I really, did a really good shot on this deer. I'm like, okay. So, and I jumped it, and it was like 14 hours after the shot. And I'm like, and it was the day before Thanksgiving. And I told him, I said, listen, right here, this is where your deer went in the woods. I said, go have Thanksgiving with your family tomorrow. The following day, come out and walk this line. If you don't find your deer off this line or in this area in 200-300 yards, he's alive. And he sent me a photo at the end of muzzleloader season that he had killed the deer, later on. And it was just like, right at the bottom. It entered right like low past the brisket on the bottom of the belly. And, it just didn't die.
Yeah, just basically hit fat. And,
whatever it took. And it's just amazing, like some of these whitetails. I'm just like, man. And I see pictures like the one I got. I mean, I'll show you the one the guy sent me. And I'm just like, how impossible is this deer not dead? Like, I mean, you can see the picture right in the middle of the rib cage,
Yeah,
yeah.
That's long.
Yeah.
I mean,
now a one long hit, so I was just talking to Darren Doran a couple days ago, and we were talking about, one long hits. And there's a picture of this carcass that's in the woods. So Darren had tracked this deer, and they found it dead, and they cut the head off of it because it had gotten chewed up by coyotes. Mm-hmm. So the guy had went back to remove the carcass later on and found that arrow was in the deer. That is not his arrow. That was underneath the hide. And
wow.
I mean, if you look at, that's the bottom of the brisket down there, and this is the top of the back. Yep. So, that was potentially a one lung hit, and that deer was walking around with an arrow.
Grew skin over it.
Yep, and just kept right on going.
That's crazy.
And I hear it all the time, like you go to like the, sometimes you get the butcher's pages and they post like all the arrows that they find in the meat and the broadheads and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, man, how do they make it through this stuff?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's almost the same. So, gosh, that would have been last year. It would have been a year before. So 2022, I shot a goose, banded goose, 7-year-old banded goose.
7 years old.
7-year-old banded goose, and this thing was a tank. I mean,
we were chasing it across the field and had to reload twice, and it would not go down.
It would not. I don't know if it was something with the pattern. It was hitting it a couple times
because it got hit at point blank.
It finally went down, and I'm breasting this bird at the house, and it had three
calloused over pellets.
3 calloused over pellets in the breast.
Wow.
And it's just nuts what these animals can do.
Yeah.
What they're capable of.
I mean, when the only thing you have to do is to live, I mean, that's what you got to do. Mm-hmm. They just got to make sure that they don't get eaten, and they wake up and they go and eat and lick their wounds clean. Like, I've tracked plenty of deer that like have, I've seen them get up and they're like, are you not going to track it anymore? And this one stands, and for instance, I was up by like the Pemberton area. Young kid shot one, and he shot it, and he said when it ran away, it was like a little wonky, like running. And he said his mom saw it run across the backyard, and it was like his ass was like all kind of wobbling, and we kind of call that like a spinal shock, where you're just going in and you interrupt that nervous system.
Gotcha.
And I put an arrow on it, and we ended up jumping that deer. It was bedded up behind somebody's shed, and the deer ran across, and arrow wanted to go after it, but I'm like, there's not a drop of blood coming off that deer. Like, he's perfectly fine. Like, he could potentially die from an infection, or somebody else could kill him. But I can't chase a live deer around and around. And when I first got involved in tracking, one of the first or second tracks that I really did was for a buddy of mine, and we got on this trail, and he was like, dude, this is going to be an easy track. It's a dead deer, 100%, Well, we ended up jumping this thing, and arrows started baying, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is awesome. And I'm like, whoa, nowadays, I'm like, that is, anytime the dog bays, that is not good.
Yeah,
like,
that's a live deer.
Yeah, right? We're dealing with a live hit, and, we ended up recovering that deer. She took me up this driveway, and I stopped her. I'm like, you're a crazy dog. There's nothing came up this driveway. Mm-hmm. So we ended up going back, dropped my buddy off, and I just said, hey, I want to go check that road one more time. We came back, and I walked up this like white sand road, and sure enough, there was a blood drip in the ground. I said, we'll come back in the morning. We came back, and we worked that line a little further, and we ended up getting this buck up on the top of this burned out ridge from where a forest fire went through. But I mean, it was like 900 and some odd yards, but he was just like, we were pushing him. Because I didn't know at the time, you know what I mean? And you kind of like take the hunter's
word.
Yeah, the hunter's word. Like, hey, I made a really good shot. And most of them, a lot of times, they can be really good shots. It's just, what didn't you see was happening with the deer? Or what did the deer do at the last second before the shot? Mm-hmm. Maybe, hey, you stopped, and you're like, meh, and he went to shoot, and he walked on you, and now you hit him a little further back. I mean,
some could walk forwards, jump back, dip.
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable what they're going to do.
Absolutely.
So, it's kind of hard to lead a shot with a bow. It's not like with a gun where you're just like pulling through it. You know what I mean? You're not doing that with a bow.
No.
At least I can't. So maybe there's somebody out there that could, I'm sure. But.
Probably Tim Wells.
Yeah, probably. But that'd be with a blowgun or something.
Yeah. So say you have a hunter who, let's just go with the hypothetical. You got a hunter who records his hunts.
Yes.
You have it on camera. He makes a very good, let's say, center mass long, double long, clean shot.
Mm-hmm.
He has tracked this deer for 100 yards. Where is the point where he should, in hypothetical, back out and give you a call? Like I said, he knows he made a good shot, but this deer is running longer than it should.
Longer should. So, it really boils down to how long of the wait process did you wait before you started tracking a deer?
Okay.
Guys will call and they'd be like, all right, I waited 2 hours, and I just kind of like, this is just my thought process. I cut that in half. You waited an hour. You know what I mean? Because time goes slow when you want to do something,
yes.
right? Mm-hmm. So, and there are times that guys do wait longer. But let's say you waited less than what you thought was probably the case, and then you start progressing that line and you jump that deer, and now you jump them. That's when you have to make the decision right then and there. Do I continue on, or do I stop and call a dog in, or do I just stop and come back tomorrow morning? Mm-hmm. If you're trailing a deer and you knew you made a good shot and your blood is just less than stellar, that's a time frame when you're like, okay, call on a dog, talk to the tracker, and whoever the tracker is that you may use, give them every bit of information you possibly can. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll ask hunters for pictures of their arrows, and I get a picture like that's all grainy. Like, I need a detailed picture of an arrow so I can see, like, okay, what type of evidence is left on that arrow, what type of forensics is there, and then that kind of bases it on. If you have a blood-soaked arrow from front to back and it's got a pastel-y pink color on there, I mean, on average, a deer's probably going to be dead with inside of 200 yards. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now you get something that's got a little bit of gut on it or something like that. Well, then you want to just start adding time to your recovery. You know what I mean? Let them lay. Mm-hmm. So it really all depends on the situation of what's at hand. So, but if the deer gets up and he's on his way, then that's when you just have to say, like, all right, I'm going to either back off or not. Mm-hmm. Like you said with this guy, he was alive for over 2 hours, laying there with his head up, And I shot one, like 2019 in Illinois, and he was standing in a creek. And when I shot, and he was like, the doe was bedded down, and he was shot, and I shot him, and there was another buck in the area because he was trying to run him off. And he went up this ridge, and he got to the top of the ridge, and he spun around like, oh, I can't leave the doe. And it was just like, he just got jelly-legged, and it was over. Mm-hmm. But his initial thought was, I need to go back to that doe. He was going to run right back down there. So if that was a marginal hit, he would have went up that thing, figured it out, and came right back down and ran that other buck off and went about his day until he bedded up and died. Yeah,
it's been perfectly fine till he died.
Until he died. I watched him spin right around. He was looking for the doe, and it was just like, bloop, down. I'm like, oh.
Now, is that the point where you're talking about where they make that decision in their mind that in their mind they're okay? Is that when that pheromone starts to dry up?
Once the body senses that it's not fatally wounded, yes.
Okay.
That's when everything starts to calm down. The deer goes from overexcited back and starts to relax back to normal. That's when everything starts to change.
Okay.
Now, I've read stories and talked to other trackers that, they've shot a deer the night before, and then in the morning the deer was seen running a deer and does in the field. Mm-hmm. And then, and just however long it takes that process, you know. And that's the hard part. You can get some of these deer that are all over hell and back, and now the dog is going through all hell and back because we don't know where to start. Like you could say, like, hey, yeah, I saw the deer in that field. Where in the field? Mm-hmm. You got 100-acre field. That's a big field.
Probably a lot of deer moving through.
Yeah, and that's one thing I have noticed. Like when I was a kid, when I shot a deer, I was always told, you take toilet paper with you and you mark the trail with toilet paper. So that way, if you were like, okay, where did he come from? You look right back and you could see the paper trail coming to you, or ribbons or something. But I find a lot of guys now just use your phone and that's it.
Drop a pin.
Yeah. Now the hard part about that is sometimes you're walking and like I had one. The guy was like, oh yeah, well I think it's over here, and I'm like, I just stood there and I'm like, you let me know when you find your last blood because all I'm doing is contaminating the area by walking all over the place. Yeah.
So I feel like depends. I feel like make it more inaccurate because I don't know. You remember when we drop pins on like trapping sites? It'll be in the area, but it could be like 50 yards in the wrong direction because the GPS didn't have you dead on.
Service
area. You have to wait like 10 minutes for it to actually get a
triangulation. Yeah, and that's what happened. This guy was like, we were within like, I found a bed 60 yards away from where he was. He said that, okay, this is where it was. Now maybe that was another blood spot that he had found when he was just walking over there. But I actually found where he thought the deer was bedded, and it was 60 yards away. And I always tell guys, if you can grab a roll of the surveyor's tape from Tractor Supply, throw it in your backpack. If you come to a spot where you're like, I'm done tracking, I'm calling a dog in, throw ribbons up, 3 or 4 of them on trees, right between it, and say, okay, the deer went between these. When I get there, I can see it. And I'll use that when I'm coming back. As I'm coming back, I like to try to flank off to the side, so that way I can bring the dog back in and start fresh. Yeah. And when Arrow loses the line on her own, she will actually circle down to the left and come back in and meet back up to that line and continue on. That's how she tests herself and makes sure that she's correct. And then sometimes she'll work right up a line if it's real thick, and she'll come right back down that line. Okay. Now, my dog hates sticker bushes. I mean, and I don't blame her because I hate them too. Yeah, but if she goes into sticker bushes, there's a reason for her going in there. Yeah. She doesn't pick and, otherwise she's like trying to like get through them, and I'm like stomping them down that one. There's a purpose, she's through them, and I'm just like, nope, that's where he went. That's where we got to go.
So you see her attitude very much change on a hot track.
Yes, 100%. I can tell when she's working a old line, and then all of a sudden it went to where we're dealing with a deer that had gotten up, let's say, in the last couple of hours, because now her speed has increased where she was checking each trail and she's going nice and easy, and then all of a sudden she's charging. Yeah. If you're dealing with a profile that's, let's say, 12 hours old overnight, that profile isn't going to change from point A to point B, really. But if the deer got out of point B, now the profile has changed. Yeah, you know what I mean? Gotcha. The scent has become more, and she can smell all that dandruff and all that stuff that the deer leaves behind in the air. It's all over the place. It's permeated everywhere. Yeah. So, that's when she starts baying and picking up speed and running at full bore. I know, like, okay, we got to assess the situation. Did we have dry blood and now all of a sudden we have fresh blood? Well, we're still, this deer's still alive, and he's just bedded up and licking his wounds. He's most likely, I find it if you track a deer 12 hours after and you jump them, and then you're like, okay, we'll give them 12 more hours and we'll come back, and you jump them again, most of the time you're not dealing with the hit that you think you're dealing with. You could be dealing with an intestinal hit or just some other type of hit that's the deer is really unsure of what it's doing. And
either needs time or that deer is going to live.
Or it's going to live. So it really depends on the situation.
Now, this is more on the technology side of things. Do you keep all the GPS data of each one of your tracks that you...
So the only thing I do is I keep them just as far as they're in like my phone, like anything I track, but like all my lines, when I lock Arrow back onto her collar, that all gets erased. I don't ever like keep people's like hunting spots and stuff like that. Like I've had people, like, oh, what do you do with my information? And I tell them, I'm like, listen, this is just to make sure that I come out of the woods and my dog comes out of the woods. And once I'm done, I'll delete it. I've had hunters ask me right in front of them, hey, can you delete it? Yep, no problem. And I show it right in front of them. It's deleted. And the state of New Jersey does make us, every year we have to put in an annual report of every track that we ran, no matter if it's recovered or not recovered. And it asks for the closest intersection. So, I do have to put like a point, like, say Route 40 and Porchtown Road. Yeah. There has to be something. I got you. So, and that I think is just understandable.
I think they asked something like that. I can't remember. I don't know if it was when you tag your deer in, or if you're if you tag your deer in, and I think it's if you don't know your management. Yes. Your management unit. Right. I don't know. I can't remember, like I said, if it's when you tag a deer in or if it's when you report a banded bird. Something I've seen that before where if you don't know your management unit, they ask you about the intersection.
Yeah, and it's pretty hard. Like, I mean, you guys are, how old are you guys?
30? 26.
24.
20, okay, so.
25.
30s.
Yeah. All right. I'm 42, so, when I used to go to the check-in station when I was, before I had a driver's license, we used to go to Sugar Hill down in Mays Landing. You'd walk in, and they had a whole map of the lower portion of the state, and it had all the management zones inside of that. So, like, say you were hunting in zone 42 and your actual unit was 541, you put that down. Well, now you go in there, it still asks you that question, but how the heck do I know? It doesn't tell you anywhere.
It does. I have found, so I shot a buck last week, and it asked me for that, and I looked at it, I'm like, there's got to be a way to figure, because obviously, looking at the one in the digest, it's hard to even tell what zone you're in.
Some of them, yes.
Yeah. But if you go, they have an interactive map.
Mm-hmm.
If you search NJ Interactive Deer Zone Map, it'll come up. And it'll actually come up to a full menu where they have the deer zone, turkey zones, waterfowl zones, and trapping zone, like your otter, beaver, permits. And if you click, you can click anywhere on the map, and it'll show you if it's a wildlife management area, what deer zone, and what management unit you're in.
It'll still give you map. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, but if you didn't know that map existed, like for me, I had no clue that map was even there.
And there still is, like, you are allowed so you have to fill that field out. And if you don't know, I've talked to some game wardens. They've never given an issue like, oh, we got to know this.
Right.
Just click the option that says unknown. It'll give you 3 options in the area you listed in your township or whatever.
Right.
And if you don't know, just click unknown.
Yeah, and that's what I've had to do a couple times.
It's not a pressing need for. No. I don't think for them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if it is, then we just got to come up with a better way to figure it out.
Yeah,
exactly.
So circling back, I was kind of curious if you did end up, I don't know, obviously with the client's permission, keeping the tracks, if you'd find any patterns in what they tend to do, if they tend to do similar things.
So in my experience level of this, whatever you think a whitetail is going to do, he's not going to do it.
Okay.
He's not going to do it, especially when you're dealing with a mature deer. When you're dealing with a mature deer, they do the unthinkable. Like, you're going to be like, he ain't going to go there. You're damn right he went there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it's just like, you just wonder, like, all right, why is he doing this? What's causing him to do this? And most of the time, it's pressure, and is he thinking clearly or not? Mm-hmm. And I believe when they start doing the unthinkable, it's because they are thinking clearly. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They're going places that they know that they can sense you coming, they can hear you coming, they can see you coming. And deer, when they feel that they're being trailed, they will make a half J. They'll go out and they'll circle back and they'll stand there and they'll be listening because now they can see what's coming behind them.
Yeah.
And then they just go about their business. Now they have they made that big circle. So now you have to make that whole circle to find where they were before they're already gone.
Yeah. I've seen that with, there for a while where I hunt now, I hunted on the ground.
Okay.
Just in between 2 sticker bushes and a holly tree. And I've had it where I've always been very mindful of my wind. I've had it where the wind switched, does are on a pile and waiting for a buck. And they catch my wind, and there they go. They come within 5 yards right here, and then they'll just circle back around and keep doing their business.
Yeah.
I've also had it to where they get, same thing, 5 yards, and then they hit a beeline back. They'll catch my wind again, and off they go.
Yeah.
They don't ever have to see me, nothing. They just know something's not right.
Yeah.
And then they come back an hour later.
Right. Mm-hmm. When you're talking the old factory receptors that dogs and deer have in their nose, I think as humans we have 100 and some million. My Bloodhound, she has, I think, either 300 million or over 300 million old receptor factors in her nose. So the ability of her to pick up anything that's in the wind, it's astronomical. And you're not out beating a whitetail's nose.
Oh, absolutely not.
You might be able to fake them for just a minute. But you stand there too long, he got you. Yeah. You know what I mean? You better hope that you got the shot and it's already gone.
Yeah.
You
You don't like that scent stuff, do you? You don't believe in the scent blocker stuff.
I think it has a purpose. I just try to stay as scent free as possible. And 2 years ago, I took Arrow to Illinois with me, and this kind of brings that situation up. And so she rode out in the truck with us, and she was just laying on the back seat, and I put a blanket there, and then when I was done, I folded the blanket up, and I left it where we were hunting. So we just got in the truck. I figured everything was good. And there wasn't one person that was with us that didn't get winded. Her scent is just, it's overpowering. I can give her a bath, and she just still has that hound dog smell. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it was just everywhere. So it's just just trying to be scent free to me is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
I tried this new thing this year, washing all my stuff in just I had well water at the house and just wash it in a bucket, not even putting it in the washing machine, and then rinsing it out as best I can with the hose and letting it hang outside. I got to do something because whatever I'm doing isn't working. You know what I mean? I've been winded a ton of times in the last couple of years, and I think that maybe it boils down to just I'm always with her and her scent's all over it, stuff. Yeah. And I ended up buying a dog crate for her so she rides in the back of my little woods truck because I use that truck to go hunting too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now I get in there and she's in the drive. I'll go in a while, I'll come out, she'll be in the driver's seat. So it's all over everything. Yeah. So I'm trying to do everything I can to just be scent free. Mm-hmm. So.
Gotcha.
No, I figured with deer hunting, I hunt one spot. Nowadays, and I know kind of how the wind's gonna act. I'm right off of a plant sort of deal, so I know how the wind reacts coming off of there. and I'm very mindful of wind. Not as much mindful as staying scent free, but if I have a bad wind, chances are, even if I've driven a half hour to that spot, I probably won't sit to stand.
Okay.
Because obviously, as you know, the wind here is way different than the wind 10 miles down the road.
Definitely.
But yeah, if I go to my spot and the wind's blowing straight away from me or where I know they're bedding, chances are I'm not going in the woods that day. I'm just going to cut my losses and go home and wait for another day.
Yeah, it's funny how, like everybody kind of works. Like I have a buddy, he's like, I want my scent to blow down into that hollow where they're bedding because they're going to pop out over here. And I'm like, all right, hey, whatever works for you,
Yeah.
Everybody's got their own philosophy, and like I'm the same way as you. I try to play the wind, and and I think that the wind has the best advantage for us. You know what I mean? And a whitetail, I believe, never puts all of its senses in one direction. It's never going to walk into the wind, everything all the time. You know what I mean? Sometimes they're going to be walking into the wind, but yet they're listening to everything behind them. You know what I mean? So their senses are always going two different ways, or they're walking with the wind up their ass, but yet now they can smell everything that's come behind them, but they can see everything that's in front of them.
Yeah.
So I feel like they're always using as many senses that they can to try to outsmart us. But and nowadays I think that there's a lot more hunters than there may have used to been.
Oh, I believe that.
And which is good, because the tradition is going to keep going.
Yes.
For a while there, it was like it didn't seem like anybody wanted to hunt. But I think COVID kind of, everybody.
Oh, same thing with fishing.
People couldn't do stuff, so they had to find something to do.
Yeah.
Archery was taken up. Fishing. Everything kind of. So.
Yeah, I definitely have seen the influx in bow hunters, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think the state's rewarding that because I think from the surveys I've done the last 2 years, I think they're trying to make it easier for deer hunters, especially with the dual buck tags, the dual zone permits, stuff like that. And but yeah, I think New Jersey is headed in a good direction as far as that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changing for sure, and like my thought process is like I would rather have you get $2 or maybe 3 a year and that's it. Like, just maybe we could go to like something where we could grow bigger deer, but yet if you have those youth hunters and first time hunters, you get 2 deer of any of your choice, no matter if it's a spike, a buck, and then after that, start letting the bucks grow, you know what I mean? But I do get like, people you pay for a tag, you want to be able to shoot something, and I get both sides of that, but I think that like sometimes I just feel, me personally, I think as a sportsman and as a hunter, I feel like we're taking too many bucks, because I think right now you could take like 7 or 8 bucks.
I believe it's
more than that. We were in the 20s when we did. If you cashed out on everything.
No, not bucks.
Total deer, yeah.
Total deer. If you hunt, say,
20s,
zone 25, you can shoot unlimited, or it used to be. I think they changed it to 9 this year. It used to be unlimited does through, or it was 3 does in fall, unlimited through permit and winter bow, and then you could shoot a buck during fall, a buck during each season, and then you can go back and shoot 2 bucks during 6 day, and permit season for shotgun, and then a buck during muzzleloader.
Yeah.
I mean, so I 100% do agree. I do think it's the same thing. Nobody wants to eat a tag.
No.
And I fell, we just moved into this house. I'm not trying to make excuses for shooting a little buck, but yeah, I was very much in that situation where I have a nice 9-pointer, and he is gone nocturnal. And I was hunting 2 days before the last day, last Wednesday, and here comes this, decent, I would assume a 2.5-year-old 6-pointer, and I fell victim to the not wanting to eat a tag.
Hey, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, and I always tell, guys they'll call me and they'll be like, hey, I got a deer down. It's not a big one. I don't care what it is. Like, you know what I mean? I don't care. I've tracked some smaller deer, that have been fawns, and I've tracked them all the way up to mature deer. I don't care. Like I said, at the end of the day, is to make sure that I recover as many deer as possible that I go on.
Yeah.
Like, right now, like I'm batting at a 50% rate. You know what I mean? I've ran 20 some tracks and I have 11 recoveries. You know what I mean? Not every deer is going to be dead, And I don't take the number of the ones that come back on camera. I can't take that number away because I already ran the track.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, when you look at the whole number in the grand scheme of things, I think if you're doing at least 50% or maybe just over or just under, you're really running a lot of tracks and you're really doing the work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
I think the guys out there that are saying that they're doing 70 and 80%, I'm just like, man, either I have the worst dog in the world, or you're really good at what you're doing.
Or their buddies that shot in double lungs are calling them.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I don't, like I told you guys before, I don't screen any calls.
Yeah.
The only thing I am doing is I am gathering information. Only reason I gather that information is so that I can base that off the knowledge of what I need to do as a tracker. Now, I'd also do is when you call me and I have a pen and paper in front of me, I will write down all the information you're telling me, because let's say I'm working, I'm going to pass you off to another tracker. And when I call him to say, hey, can you take this track? He'll be like, this is what I got going on. This is what the hunter told me. Are you interested? Yeah. Okay. Then I give you the guy's name and you call him up, and, we hopefully get your deer taken care of. But if we don't take all the information, we're kind of just like, you're out in the dark.
Yeah, I got you.
So it's some guys I feel that may just call up and they're like, oh, I got a gut shot. Okay, I'll take it. Oh, I got a shoulder it. Nah, that one's going to live. I'm just a firm believer. You don't know unless you go.
Yeah. Now, do you factor into your percentages, trails that you run out of line on? So say you come up to a property line where that property owner says, no, I don't want you on my property. Do you have to factor them in as well?
I don't necessarily factor them in. That just becomes a non-recovery for me.
Gotcha.
I've lost, without having my book in front of me, I'm pretty sure I've lost 5, maybe 6 to property lines.
Really?
Where just you couldn't get in there. One of them I know was 100% liver hit. It was just pushed. And, he got into the property, and I got to the edge of the property, and the guy's like, I can't go in there. I'm like, dude, your deer, I know your deer's dead in here. You just got to, go over there and get the information. And he's like, nope. He said, the guy will not give me permission. And the same thing happened the other night. We came just last night, came out to a line, and the guy's like, I can't go in there. I said, okay. I said, did you try to get permission? Yep. They said, no. Okay.
Well, I'm sure you've heard of the story. I cannot remember where this was, but I know it was in New Jersey. It was a monster deer. There's a video on YouTube where guy shot it. He had permission from every other landowner in this parcel. Mm-hmm. Goes in, knows the deer is dead. The story goes, he knows pretty much exactly. He could drop a pin on a map where this deer was dead at. He went up and knocked. The guy would not let him on his property. And 2 days later, the guy goes and gets the deer. Fish and Wildlife show up and take the deer, and when they're trying to take the deer, he's sitting there cutting it up with a chainsaw. They say it was close. It was breathing on the record of the New Jersey typical, taken with I think a muzzleloader. I want to say muzzleloader or bow. I forget. But yeah, I guess this guy was so fired up because he wanted to shoot this deer. He was so mad at the guy that shot him on his own property that he would not let him go get that deer. Went and took it, and then when Fish and Game showed up, he said, screw you, nobody can have the deer.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. I mean, we've all heard the stories. Friendships have been ruined over deer hunting. You know what I mean? And it's and acquaintances have been long lost over deer hunting. And I just I get it. If a property owner doesn't want to allow us on their property to run a hound or whatever, I have to be professional about it. And,
absolutely.
I have to wash my hands of it. And no matter if I feel the deer is dead or I think it's going to live. It's just one of those things. It's out of my hands. There's nothing I can do with it.
They said no.
Yeah.
I cannot convince them.
Right.
Yeah, you're not going to run illegally on a property.
And I always tell the guys too. I'm always like, listen, when maybe after season, go up and knock on a door. Come March or something like that. Go up and knock on a gentleman's door and say, listen, maybe it's because you're a deer hunter and you didn't want to let me on your property, but can I walk your property and at least look for my deadhead? If I find any sheds, I will give them to you. Mm-hmm. And try to build a relationship with them. And I'd be surprised on how many times somebody that is a sportsman would let you do that later on. I tracked one in Illinois a couple years ago when I had Arrow out there, and the landowner was like, listen, you can come in on my property a couple days after gun season, because this was on a Wednesday and gun season out there starts on a Friday. Mm-hmm. He was like, you can come on Monday after gun season and look all you want. He was like, I'll already be home by then. He was like, I don't have to tell you. Yeah. He says, I got people that lease my land. They're coming to gun hunt. I can't have you going in there and blowing the land up.
Especially with a dog.
Right.
I mean, I definitely understand that side of things.
Yeah.
If you have an active hunter that just doesn't want a dog in there, but he's like, look, come when these guys are out of this property. I can respect that.
Yeah.
But taking a deer just because you're jealous.
That's a whole
Yeah,
different
that's a
story.
whole different. Yeah. And like a lot of people get nervous about that, like you just said about bringing a hound in and working the property. I believe, and this is my personal opinion, that we do less damage to the actual property by bringing in the dog and letting the dog work a straight line to the deer, retrieving the deer and bringing it right back out. We're done and out. You know, where a hunter, it could take the hunter, say, like, let's just say 5-6 hours of walking, and maybe you're going to walk up on this deer depending on how heavy the foliage is.
Yeah.
You know, where you bring the dog in, it's like, boom, right to
Yeah,
the deer,
yeah.
bring it straight back out.
Like you said with a grid search.
Yeah.
So I understand that point 100%.
I think that breaks up the woods a lot more than
Yeah.
what you're doing, you know, so.
I noticed I got far away,
Oh.
so I scooted up.
Well, you got anything else?
Just for shits and giggles, do you waterfowl hunt?
I used to.
Yeah.
I was telling Brian that earlier. You know, I grew up on the Egg Harbor River, basically between Summers Point and Mays Landing. So
Yeah.
growing up, you know, I had a sneak box and I ran, you know,
Sea ducking?
mainly just, you know, black ducks, mallards.
Okay.
Every now and then we get into some mergansers and stuff, you know, down on
Yeah.
the bayfront. And
Ever eat one?
not a merganser, no. That I can't. Yeah.
The first time we took a duck hunt, a common merganser hen landed in the decoys. He goes up to shoot it. I told him, I said, you will not shoot that bird because I am not breasting it out and you're not breasting it out at my house.
Yeah. I mean, what if.
I have a hooded on the wall.
Yeah,
But
oh,
I
yeah.
will not. Well, actually, there is a common, but you
Yeah,
got that from a buddy at work.
Yeah. I mean,
I will not shoot him.
I did a lot of gunning when I was younger. I mean, you know, we had sneak boxes. All of my decoys were all cork, and they came from Pete Hilliard down in Pleasantville. You know, and
Oh, yeah.
I had a ton of. I mean, at one point, I probably had, I don't know, 2 or 3 different dozens of birds. You know, from wood ducks to black ducks. I had a full 13 stool black duck rig. You know,
Really?
I had all kinds of stuff, and then I just got to the point where it was like, one day after I had moved up, and me and my brother-in-law were wood duck hunting on the river up on the Mullica, and we were all tucked up in there, and I was just like, I just don't enjoy this that much anymore, you know. And then it became a newfound passion for bow hunting and all that kind of stuff, you know. And I think that as a sportsman, you go through those time changes where you're going to like something a little more than you did then. And then a couple years ago, I sold my sneak box to a gentleman. I think he was from Williamstown area, and you know he's gunning it now, and you know as long as it keeps going. But there's sometimes I do kind of like, you know, you see the birds stolen in, you're like, oh man, you know. Especially when I used to have my lab, man. He used to just sit on the gun and he would just shake. Oh man, it was, you know, there was nothing like that on a nice crisp morning, you know what I mean? And friggin' just raining. But
I think that's what. So I've been. It's 2016 is when I really started duck hunting and goose hunting, and I think I kind of got into a lull, you know, where it was just like we'd go out and shoot a couple birds and it'd be like just going through the motions.
yeah,
And I think Goose, the dog down there, got that spark back in me, and it's relit it. So yeah, I understand what you probably went through with it.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have the dog to get you back into that
Definitely.
fire.
Yeah, I mean, there was when I had Ace, you know, he was a black lab, and any time that I grabbed the gun case, my man was at the door waiting.
He's the
I would
same
open
way.
the door, he'd be at the truck door, like sitting, like I'm going. I'm like, dude, I'm going deer hunting. Like you got to stay here, you know. And it was always the case, you know. And having that bond, I believe, with a dog is like that. Like you said, it brings you back to where you need to be. You know what I mean? They're just excited as you are, and you're just as excited to see the dog work. You know, and that's one thing that no matter what type of dog work I'm doing, if it was retrieving work or now doing tracking work, just watching a dog work and understanding how a dog progresses on a track or doesn't, or progresses in a set of bulrushes going in to find a bird that's down, you know, just being able to see that dog work is something that's just, you know, my book, there's no other thing better.
Yeah.
So
That's where we come in with the romance part of it, the gratification of it.
yes, definitely 100%. So
Well, Matt, if you would like, this is where we give the guest the opportunity to let them know how to get a hold of you, if you would like to open yourself up to that.
yeah, sure. So I can be found on Facebook at On the Trail Deer Recovery. Also can be found on Instagram, the same thing. It's just as underscores underneath, you know, each word. You know, Instagram's famous for doing that kind of stuff. And then, you know, my direct phone number is 609-457-5904. I can also be found in the Fish and Game Pendulum. I got a whole you know, ad in there. Okay. So, and then just, you know, if you type in Facebook, New Jersey Bow Hunters, you know, I try to make posts on there, and, you know, I'm sure a lot of people have already, you know, read my posts out there and stuff. So, you know, I always leave a detailed organization of what happened. So, you know, you kind of can get a hold of me those ways.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
no
we
problem, guys.
appreciate it.
Really appreciate you having me. Thanks.
Thank you.